Alright, so you were walking here in the rain this morning.
No, so it's all the things that you expect to feel when you're like in London, right? You like go out, it's wet, rainy,
Yeah.
quite cold, and you usually end up like traipsing along the sidewalk to
Yeah.
wherever you're gonna go because you have to embrace the rain when you live in London.
You can't not embrace the rain, otherwise you're just going to be depressed.
Yeah, the only thing is I'd probably be expecting to be there, but I'm not.
You're not.
I'm still in Cape Town, and it's actually just a rainy day in winter in Cape Town.
Yeah, in the last episode we were talking about your mad plan to go to Namibia and then to Istanbul and then through to the UK, but Istanbul or Turkey is now on the no-fly list to the UK.
Yeah, so it's now on the red list, and I probably would have gotten better weather in Namibia, but yeah, I was like, no, I'm not gonna take the effort.
So right now it's really cold and rainy in Cape Town, but it's just today. Yesterday was an absolutely beautiful day, like gorgeous. We went to the promenade with my sister and we had lunch together, looked out over the ocean. The day before, I took a ride down to Llandudno, which is a beach which is supposed to be pronounced
Llandudno.
Llandudno, because it's a Welsh word.
Because it's a Welsh word, and it's a Welsh word, and the L's don't make any sense.
And the L's don't make any sense, and it was absolutely beautiful, and that's what I like. Well, one of the many things that I like about Cape Town is that even in the middle of winter, there are days or weeks interspersed here and there where the weather is absolutely gorgeous, and you can go to the beach.
Exactly. And I don't know who I was speaking to, but I was talking about, you get this real sense of place when you're living in Cape Town. And one of the things that I really have been doing a lot lately is just like walking to work. You like get the sense of like being part of the city.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can, okay, my walk isn't that long, to be fair, but I find that when you walk through the city, you can notice smaller things that have changed, like different people that are along the sidewalk.
Coffee shops that survived.
Coffee shops that
didn't survive.
Exactly. And it's kind of gives you like the sense of like that you're in a place that you want to be, rather than if you like work for a big corporate, you sometimes have to get up in the morning. And a lot of these corporate workers, they like to live in the suburbs for some reason, which doesn't make any sense to me, because you get up probably a lot earlier than I did. You get into your car, you listen to the radio, probably the same songs. Sometimes you do podcasts, but then you get to work and this underground parking, and you need to go up to your office. You work for the day, and you come back and you do the.
You go from
same commute
bubble
back.
to bubble, right? Is that you step out of your isolated house into an isolated car that gets you to your isolated underground parking lot at your work, and then
Exactly.
you get back into your car and you go to the underground parking lot of the shopping mall to get your groceries at Pick and Pay or Woolies corporate.
But like that's kind of what I would expect from like Johannesburg, and it's kind of one of the reasons why I like living in the city, is because you get that sort of feeling of being part of the city.
It's also like very non-sterile, and I know that doesn't necessarily sound like a good thing, but it is. It feels organic, and you're very much aware of the problems of the city, but it also has a genuineness to it because of these flaws. It's kind of like when you're writing a novel, a great novelist writes their characters as imperfect, flawed people, and that's how you write a great character. It's how you identify a character that like really resonates with you. It's not because they're perfect, it's because they're imperfect in ways that are interesting.
Exactly. So on Tuesday I went out. I'd made some plans, but they fell through. So I decided to just I was ready to go out. So I went to the songwriter showcase down at House of Machines, and that's like one of my favorite things to do, because you go at night, you see kind of the same people doing like their songs on the stage. You get 2 songs. You get kind of the same people, but then there's like a feeling of sameness, right? Like the same bartender, but there's different people moving through that space. And it's kind of like that's what Cape Town's about. And I was thinking it because I was just thinking about it while I was sitting there having my beer. I was like, do people know that they are part of what makes Cape Town great?
Yeah.
So, and I chatted to this guy, and he's just like, this is really cool. Like, Cape Town seems really like hip and like a lot of startups. And I was like, yeah, it's because it's, there's a lot of creativity around. And it's also that people they don't just want to live their life for the work or the grind anymore. They want to be able to extend and like go feel those other aspects of their life. So the first guy that I saw when I walked in, it's this dude. He's just come from his corporate office. He was still in his like suit and tie, and he's there like singing like these like operatic kind of style songs. And he was sang 2 songs, and I was just like, that's, he's still living like his part of his dream that he wants to be.
Yeah, I like that. I think Cape Town is it's a burgeoning tech hub in Africa, right? And I'd say one of the main reasons for that is, we've got a decent. We'll dig into like a decent amount of startup support and infrastructure, but it's also just a good place to live, right? It's it as you said, is like an eclectic mix of creative people. It's got that creative energy. At least on an international level, it's a fairly inexpensive place to live, to work.
Yeah.
When compared to Western countries, and yeah, I found myself here 6 years ago to become a video game developer, and I decided to stick around. And I get the feeling I'll always find my way back to this place.
Yeah, I've really felt like when I left Cape Town, coming back, it's just has this different feeling to it. But I think that's where it starts, right? Cape Town, I go into Nomad list every now and again, and we're slowly but surely creeping our way to the top of the list. Okay, we're not going to beat like Bali and all those places, which I've never been, but I can imagine, I can imagine what it's like, but I've never lived in that reality, right? I've never been there.
Yeah.
So, but for me, like, that's the first stage, is getting people from all over the world to come here. They like realize how cool it is. You get these influencers who start like tweeting and posting and Instagramming about all the cool places to live. You get people who come, and they are creative people, and then they'll have an idea, and maybe they'll be like, right, I want to start a business. Okay, here's where the problems come in. Like, you've got foreigners, and it's very hard for them to actually start businesses. We've got someone downstairs, Peter, who's from the Netherlands. And he says that he had to struggle to prove that he wants to come start a business, because it's quite a gray area in terms of like, you think of like an immigration official, they're like, why do you want to come here? He's like, I want to start a business. It's like,
but in Peter's case, it's also like, I want to start a business in psychedelics.
No, he's doing AI.
Oh, he's doing AI.
Yeah.
Who's the other dude?
I think it's Gino.
Gino, also from the Netherlands.
He's from the Netherlands.
My mistake.
I mean, for some reason, the Dutch people love it here, probably because of the language, Afrikaans. I've heard it said that like Afrikaans sounds like a baby language to Dutch people.
Afrikaans is like Dutch, but spoken like the orcs in Lord of the Rings speak. It's just like a whole bunch of like heavy R's, heavy G's.
It's like if I started saying ye old in front of everything, I would probably have the same feeling on British people.
No hate to Afrikaans people. I mean, like I went to Afrikaans high school.
It's a cultural thing, right? But I've also noticed that we've got Dutch people. In 2019, I was chilling with a lot of French people. They also come down here.
Lots of Germans here, or at least
they used to be.
In the before
they kind of slipped away. I don't know if there's more industry in Germany. I don't know.
Every now and then I I'm sitting at a restaurant, and there's a table of very energetic Germans speaking nearby. But there are a couple of things that make starting a company as an international, but also as a South African, pretty tough. So there are, firstly, great tax incentives to start a small company in South Africa, especially if you're like a sole proprietor. Is you can apply for a thing called turnover tax, where your taxation is dependent on your turnover, and up until 1 million rand per annum is you receive an incredibly minimal tax rate.
Yeah.
Like between 0 and 3%.
Yeah, almost nothing.
Almost nothing. And that's awesome for starting a new business, because taxation is a big chunk of your income.
But you're not just looking at taxation. So like I see it as like the first stage is people coming to South Africa starting businesses. That's not really what we want. We want South Africans to start businesses.
Yeah.
But it does represent capital, which is one of the components that you need, right? Access to capital. From chatting to people around in the ecosystem, access to capital is one of the biggest problems because you need to have money to start a business and you need to have some sense of security. And even though foreigners aren't giving out capital, they have capital in the sense that they're not worried to fall back on their home country. Like they can probably go back to Netherlands and go onto the welfare system and still like live a normal life if everything fails.
Yeah.
We don't have that necessarily, but that lends them to starting businesses.
Right, we've got a box coming by. Or it's not a box, it's a couch.
Full-on couch.
All right. But I hear exactly what you're saying, and I was speaking to a fairly prominent person in the South African tech industry who spoke about how they started out as a South African company, but then ended up incorporating in the Netherlands because there's more available capital. But also, in the case that they ever want to be acquired, they ever want to go through a disposal, they have a corporate structure that investors or purchasers or whatever are familiar with, whereas we have a bit of a different structure over here that only like South African VCs are familiar with, and it makes the entire system a bit difficult to interact with an international market.
Yeah. So I've been reading a little bit about this, right? So on that aspect, it's like from what I've read is that as a South African company, it's very hard to have a foreign owner.
Yeah.
So that is where that acquisition problem comes in. Like if you want someone who wants to have part ownership, they're a foreign company, that's problematic, right? But also on the local level, we did have a Section 12J company structure, which was a tax incentive for people who are wealthy to be able to invest via the VC mechanism, right? But from what I read recently, that's actually been cancelled because the government has thought that, okay, we'd rather get the tax from these rich people than incentivize small businesses, which I think is a problem because they're thinking through how the government probably thinks they're thinking very short term.
Yeah.
Whereas building a tech ecosystem, building the business support around those tech businesses, that takes a little bit of time. It's not going to happen within like 12 months.
Yeah. So a secondary thing on top of that, and this is something that is the root of many discussions on the ZA Tech community channels, and this is something that I have experienced in my company, Just Sketch Me. Receiving payments from international. So, like, let's take for instance, I'm running a SaaS company in the art space, and the vast majority of my users are international, mostly in the United States, Canada, Europe. South Africans only make up about 1%, maybe a little bit less than 1% of the user base, and if you are a company in South Africa, you can only receive your revenue in South African rands, in ZAR, right? Which is very frustrating because it is difficult to sell to Americans in ZAR because America tends to think that America is the world. And it's like, okay, this is going to cost you $9, and then when they're checking out, it says, oh, this is 147.62 ZAR. I know it's not it's debatable whether that is bad or immaterial for your company, but it is definitely the root of a lot of discussions, and I firmly believe that we should be accepting of these big currencies, accept US dollars, accept British pounds, and there are other people on ZA Tech who will vehemently disagree and say, like, no, people must just fucking accept that they are paying in ZAR. You can handle the conversions yourself.
So my thinking I think I'd be against that, because for me, like, I know it's important to cater to your customer, right? If they're American, if your majority of your customers are American, they should be able to pay in the currency that makes sense. Then thinking about it in terms of like SARS, like if you've got a dollar amount coming in, how do you kind of convert that at the time in a way that makes sense? And I can imagine like SARS is not very jacked up in terms of exchange controls, but at the same time, I say that it's actually more of a bit of marketing to say, hey, we actually are a company in South Africa, and you're buying our product.
That's interesting.
So isn't it like, and I think maybe that's because I'm also jaded towards the Europe way of thinking, where it's like you do get okay, UK's not part of Europe anymore, but like you get pounds, you get euros, you get like the Czech krona, like you've got these different sort of areas, and they are part of the global ecosystem, and you just got to get along with it. And maybe not in payment space, but in languages. One of the things that I'm like is like, why don't you host events in all different types of languages? As a big company, most people will just say, okay, let's just do English. But then you're like cutting out French people, you're cutting out Italian, Spanish, and I think that's part of like building a togetherness of like the whole global like ecosystem.
I actually agree with you over there, and I think that is where I would like to see us end up. One of the things that's a bit frustrating is that we're one of the only countries that have, or at least one of the only countries that I've seen that has that regulation, right? It's not actually a payment gateway problem, it's a South African Reserve Bank problem. So Paystack, which is a Nigerian payment provider similar to Stripe, that was actually recently acquired by Stripe, operates in Nigeria, Ghana, I think Kenya, but I'm not sure, and South Africa. And in Ghana and Nigeria, you can accept US dollars and British pounds, and then the local currency. But in South Africa, you can only accept ZAR, which means that it's not that much better than what we currently have existing with our PayFast and our PayGates and et cetera, et cetera. I think I just want Stripe in South Africa. Stripe, if you're listening to this, please like expedite that process.
I don't know, like I've spoken to customers who like they say Stripe's not the greatest. They still take their fees, you know. Like I guess it's just the developer experience that you're looking for, right?
It's a developer experience, but also so let me break down the fees that I'm currently experiencing with Just Sketch Me. Is we currently sell through Gumroad. Now Gumroad isn't a payment gateway; it's a reseller platform, right? So they technically sell Just Sketch Me on our behalf. They take their fee, which is 3.5% plus 30 cents. And then they pay me out to PayPal, because they can't pay it out to my South African bank account because they don't have wire transfer set up for that. So it pays out to PayPal. But now, if the customer is paying through Gumroad but with a PayPal account, then it pays directly into my PayPal account. Because I have a South African PayPal account, it's not the 3.5% PayPal fee that Americans get. It's 4.4% plus 40 cents or something like that, right? So then once I've got all that money inside of my PayPal account, I now need to execute a withdrawal via specifically FNB, because they're the only bank with access to PayPal in South Africa. So they charge a fluctuating PayPal withdrawal rate between 1.3 and 1.7% of the amount. So let's just say 1.5, and then there's also the forex difference between United States dollars and ZAR. And when I work it all out in aggregate, I'm paying about between 7 and 8% in holistic fees before I have that money in my bank account, and that's absolutely wild, right? I would love to just use. I mean, now that we're having this chat, I'm like sitting here thinking about fees again, but I promise to put this to bed. But let's take, for instance, just implement PayFast and my own my own subscription system, I could set that up and pay the minimal, I think it's like 2.9% plus 3 Rand, and have that as my only fee. That would save me a couple $1,000s every month. Oh no.
Oh no, that's not good. But it doesn't sound like you just want Stripe. It sounds like you just want simplified fee structure.
Let's see if we are going to get any more drilling sounds. No? We're good? Okay, let's talk. Yes.
This is a bad choice. We thought it'd be a nice quiet nook, but it's actually like a lot of stuff going on.
It's a very pretty nook. There's some saddles on the wall. There's a very ornate ceiling with a chandelier. There's a bunch of books behind us. A nice wooden old school desk with like a leather topping. I'm enjoying the space that we chose. Even if the elevator is nearby, that's the ding dong you hear.
Yes, exactly. So why don't we just start our own payment gateway?
So there is a person who is currently trying to build out like a Gumroad-esque thing for South Africa, or he's conceptualizing it, and I will check in with him and see what the progress is over there, because I would love to see that here, and maybe in the future, he can give us some stuff to talk about.
Maybe we can invite him on.
Yeah,
invite him on the pod.
That sounds because we're podcasters now.
Yeah, we can do that. But yeah, I think what annoys me is that I think and it's probably for a good reason, is that the payments industry is very like opaque, right? In terms of like what the layers are, I went on like a tangent where I do this quite regularly. I'm like, it can't be that hard to X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And then I go into this like rabbit hole of trying to figure out like how does it actually work, and there's like companies layered on top of companies on top of companies, and to an extent I think that's it prevents innovation, and I think that's also part of the whole tech ecosystem thing, is that when you come to, in the UK or in like some of these developed economies, all of these like little pieces have been broken out for you. So if you want to build the Gumroad of South Africa, you can just like tack on and have this like little niche, and you can be pretty well off, because there's enough people that will need that, and you can. Whether it's successful or not, question.
A really good example of that is that there are a couple of companies that try and improve the creator economy, kind of like Gumroad, and what they do is they're backed by Stripe. Yeah. Right. So what they do is they just build out the delivery and UX mechanisms for operating your, membership to whatever it is that people are selling, and then Stripe handles all of the stuff underneath. So it's actually a great example, is Stripe facilitates that, and it's nice having those layers. Whereas in South Africa, it feels like we kind of have to build those layers up a little bit at the moment.
And that comes to like what's the benefit of having a product versus a platform. So Stripe is moving more towards a platform.
Yeah.
But I can imagine from their point of view, like entering a new market, you're going to have a lot of overlay just to get to that point, because I doubt. I'm talking out my ass now, but like I doubt F&B have like the mechanisms to make it easy for them to hook into their systems. But there's rumor that there's going to be open banking-esque kind of style regulations coming into effect in South Africa. It's probably a little bit down the line, but that will at least move the companies to become more like, okay, let's externalize some of our services so that other people can tack into them.
So I was doing a bit of contract work for an Australian company about 2 years ago, and they have a local bank. This isn't like one of their big banks, it was just one of their local banks. And we were talking about how that company is going to accept payments, and he's like, the bank has an API for that. And he just sent me through this PDF, and yes, it was like dense bank PDF, but it ended up just being a couple of simple API calls with the person's credit card information, and it just worked.
Yeah.
Right. There was no need for Stripe or anything like that, and the bank, it was zero fees.
So I spoke to a company once, and they were like, yeah, we're setting up, some sort of store where they can buy stuff, right? I was like, they're like asking about how do they need to keep like the credit card information safe or something like that.
All that compliance, yeah.
On the compliance side, and I mean that you've got to be secure, right? But I was like, why don't you just use Stripe and they'll take care of all of that for you? And the person was like, no, because the fees are too high. I can just plug into the APIs. And there's an interbank system. I can't remember the name. I was trying to think of it. But they just plug it to that, and they're like, oh no, and then we don't have to pay all the exorbitant fees.
Yeah, and I'm like, I would love that here.
That is cool. Like they can pretty much, they don't need Stripe, and they save themselves like the fees of like 2% plus whatever,
Right. I take back the Stripe. If you're listening to this, come here. Actually, tell you what, FNB. If you can create a public-facing API for me to accept payments at 0 fees directly into the FNB account, I will be your customer for life.
What happened to Standard Bank? They had an API that they exposed at some point.
Was this via the Root program?
I don't know if that was part of Root. I think Standard Bank were like going forward in terms of like a digital bank. But then I like left the country, and it kind of like moved out of the back of my brain.
I'll have to take a look into that. I know that we've got a kind of newish digital first bank that recently opened in South Africa, Time Bank. Yeah. So I'd love to go and explore what exactly that means. It could just be like a better user experience via not having to go into the bank to do the stuff that you want, but it could also mean that they've exposed some public stuff, so it's worth looking into.
But that's also what I kind of fear in terms of the banking people in South Africa. I would imagine that they would like, no, this is our secret source, why are we exposing it? And the effort is probably not worth the reward is not worth it, but in terms of like a more evolving ecosystem where people tack on. Think about insurance, right? You got like companies like Pineapple.
Yep.
Another fruit named company. I think it's a trend. People call themselves pineapple, orange,
cherry,
apple. But they imagine trying to innovate within the insurance space, right?
Yeah.
First of all, they have to have people to evaluate the product. So I think with Pineapple, you take a picture of your object, and then they give you the validation, and they have some underwriter which they have that process, right? Mm-hmm. It must have been a mission just getting to that point where you've got some sort of digitization of the underwriting process.
Sort of. So about 3 years ago, OfferZen was holding these make days in partnership with Root, which had created a public insurance API, where it was just a bunch of API calls to get valuations or get insurance information, submit claims, etc., and they were running these make days to try and get people to essentially hack out stuff on top of this insurance API.
Yeah.
So recently I got insurance for all the equipment at my company, and I'm using an app called Naked Insurance.
That's it. Yeah.
And they're underwritten by Hollard. I wouldn't be surprised if Hollard has created an insurance API as well. I'm not saying that they have, but I wouldn't be surprised if they have, because it makes sense for them as a company to make it as easy as possible for other companies to sell their services on their behalf.
Yeah, I think that's quite a common trend. Is that a big company, they will form a smaller company and like Naked, or maybe they would acquire Naked at a certain point, and then that would just make things a lot easier because they can work with the dev teams together to build that out. But in terms of Hollard going, okay, we're going to take a step and we're going to just make this available more readily. I'm pretty sure if you need to have a few business guys in your team to hunt down who's the guy to talk to, go on through a few PDFs and finally get an email, and then you'll finally. But if you made it external and saying hey, if you want to integrate with the Hollard APIs, here's the fee, here's the requirements, here's the API docs.
I was chatting with a guy this morning about how corporates tend to not really innovate and operate really slowly, And that's why, you know, startups will like overtake them in a space, and then they will in time become a corporate themselves and slow down. And I think by, let's take for instance insurance companies, which are notorious for being big megaliths that move really slowly, by exposing an API like that, they are leveraging that startupiness, because you and I could go and start a novel insurance app, like Herman and Jason started an insurance app where you know, take a picture of your laptop, and then it uses machine learning and AI to automatically determine the value of it, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we could theoretically go and do that, and Hollard would benefit from our startupiness, our innovation and ideas, and the ability to iterate quickly, which they can't necessarily do internally, just due to the fact that they're a big corporate.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, the big companies, they probably were small at one stage, and then they're getting to this point where there's so many people and so many things going on that to coordinate something of that effort, to go through the bureaucracy, is just too much. It's also like an approach that I've read about when you're trying to move to a DevOps mindset within an enterprise.
Yep.
Is you create like a separate team that can basically YOLO, and then they go and build these processes out, and once they're ready, they'll apply it into the existing enterprise. And it works the same with moving to cloud. You have like a cloud center of excellence, where it's like a team who know how to do cloud stuff.
Yeah.
And then they will move through the organization, finding different pieces, and then like, you know, modernizing it. But more on the business side, like, that's a good thing about startups, is that they push the enterprise to either redefine itself or, like, you know, update itself. I'm pretty sure if these new neobanks didn't come along, like, the apps, I mean, I don't know about the F&B app, but I'm pretty sure it's still pretty it's a lot. But I noticed, like, I'm on ABSA, I was on ABSA, and ABSA's app, like, got really good. Like,
the Standard Bank app got really good. F&B's one it works.
I mean, it's nothing compared to, like, the UK ones, like Starling, Monzo, you know, but those are like, they were started in the digital age, and they're like, well, we're going to approach these people first, and then we're going to, you know, not even have like physical banks. But I think with ABSA and them, they have to try and move with these old mechanisms, and they probably have a lot of business units.
Cool. So I'm gonna pull full circle over that and say, okay, we know what's great about Cape Town to run a company from. Just, you know, the good quality of life, the affordability of the place, the fact that we do actually have infrastructure in place, good internet, actually really good internet.
It's very good internet.
And bar load shedding, consistent power, etc., and just a really good creative hub full of talented people. And then we've got our, you know, negatives, which is, you know, access to capital. Maybe some of the infrastructure that we might need isn't necessarily available. What do you think could be improved here? Like, if you were, you know, someone up in Parliament with a decent amount of pull, what would you push for to turn Cape Town into the tech hub that I think it rightly deserves to be?
Interesting question. Just from talking about that corporate problem, we kind of do have access to capital from these bigger companies that want to innovate, right? And it's more about getting those companies to find the startups, and also have the startups have less of a downside. I think that's the main thing. We need to have better support mechanisms in terms of, hey, I want to start a business. Maybe having a stipend of some sort. I know that means, like, where does the money come from? There's always that question. But, like, if you're starting a business, you get some sort of
I completely agree.
stipend to say, like, hey, you get a little bit of cash every month.
I mean, the only reason that I could go full time on my business is because I built out a little reservoir of cash by teaching and mentoring alongside my job.
And then it's also about, like, where do those founders go, right?
Yeah.
If you're in the township, just to get to Cape Town, like, we're very privileged to be able to live in Cape Town and work in it. But if you're from like out in the sticks or in the townships, where do you go? How do you get to a place where you can collaborate, find your co-founders, and also have access to the mentorship aspect of like other people? And that's where it really takes a while to get the flywheel going, right?
Yeah.
You need to have people who have started a business, found some sort of success, and then they go into the mentorship loop, and then they're mentoring the new people. And that's why I love things like a startup grind, where you go and you listen to founders where they started out. You kind of get this like insight into what they are and how they think, and that perpetuates you to kind of want to start something and do the same.
Yeah.
And that's the loop that you need to get going.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I'd say, yeah, finding ways to stimulate local business. I think even, so stipends are a really good one, but also just like access to governmental capital to start businesses is a huge thing, and it's one of the reasons why like so many tech companies, or especially game studios, are forming in like Sweden and Norway, is because you can essentially go to the government and be like, I'm going to try my best Swedish accent. We want to start a game studio.
Yeah.
And then the government is like, here is some money. And then...
Go out and do it.
Yeah, and then off you go.
Yeah.
And I think that's really neat, and it definitely builds more jobs internally. And yes, it is a big upfront cost to the government, but I think overall it stimulates the economy in exponentially increasing ways.
It's also you got to take a more long-term view on it too.
Exactly.
Because the thing is, you're as government, you're now saying, okay, we're going to deallocate money towards building houses for poor people, and we're going to allocate it to people wanting to start business and pay a stipend to live in Cape Town.
Yeah, that's a tough call to make.
It's a tough call to make, but and the the survival rate of startups is still a thing. Like startups do fail. They still like there's only one in a few that like really make it, but that's those people starting businesses, and it doesn't have to be a startup. It has to be. Maybe it should be phrased more towards small, medium enterprises. Yeah. Because startup has its own connotations, and you're thinking about, if you think of like a serial founder, they're starting startups. They're not starting small businesses that are basically lifestyle businesses. But if you go out and you start a business like a tuck shop at near your school or something like that, you should have something to fall back on if you fail. Yeah. And you should have routes to figure out how to grow. Yeah. Because that's what's going to employ people. So then, in finding ways to bring money into South Africa internationally is I've seen a couple of countries during COVID, during the pandemic, start issuing remote working visas. And I think that's a fantastic thing to leverage here in Cape Town, because internationals do want to come here. They do want to enjoy our mountain and our ocean, and they want to come and work out of co-working spaces and coffee shops over here. And I think that we should definitely encourage that, because there's a good chance that they will come here and be running their company and then start spending money locally, start hiring locally, and essentially just injecting that capital into our economy. So digital nomads is a special case of tourism, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So tourism is one, like I've read about this before, is like tourism is like one of the most efficient types of export that you can have, because you have natural resources, you throw a few people, you take them, you do touristy things with foreigners, and they directly spend their foreign money on like something that's South African.
And you don't even have to pay for shipping.
You don't have to pay shipping.
They ship themselves here.
It's very efficient. And this is why I think tourism and Cape Town is a tourism hotspot already. We just need to promote that tourism side a little bit more. And the visa situation is also annoying, because I know, like as a foreigner, you only get like a 3-month visa, and then at that point you have
tourist visa.
Yeah, you get a tourist visa, and then I've seen people get extended for an extra 3 months, so you can get max 6 months. Yeah. And you have to fly back to somewhere else and reapply or re-come into the country. Yeah. And for someone who's a digital nomad, it might work for them 3 months, but if you really want to get that feeling of Cape Town and become like,
gotta be here for a year.
You gotta be at least a year, for sure. Like, And I think that's I'm hoping that improves.
I think it will. I think so. I went and I put some money into real estate in Cape Town because I hypothesize that at the end of this pandemic, or when the pandemic is less of a problem, because of mass vaccinations or something, that the world has come to realize that people can work remotely, right? And we have more people than ever before in history working remotely. And people are going to realize that once the lockdowns end, they can work from anywhere. And they're going to come here.
Because we've got that good internet. Because we've got that good sunset.
Right. They're going to come here, and I think that Cape Town is going to thrive off of remote working tourism in, let's say, a year's time. And I think we just need to be prepared for that. And I think that we need to start getting some visas, like a new visa structure for them.
We need a new visa structure.
Yeah.
And we need people who already have established businesses, and maybe even government, to think about external people helping them solve their problems.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the mentality is this is my stuff, we're gonna do this as a company and we're gonna sort out all of these little issues, rather than, it's hard to do, right? Because you've got to advertise that you got something wrong. And I think working with a couple of startups, companies don't like to say that they're doing badly. They like to look strong from the outside, and this might be partly a South African thing. You have sort of the lone South African who kind of builds their business and empire by themselves, but things like government making data accessible to the public to allow other people to innovate around those ideas. It's kind of it represents a loss of control, but it also represents an opportunity that someone else could create jobs from that, rather than just having to rely on government all the time.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. I hear you. So we're heading up almost at the 45-minute mark. I think this has been a really good conversation.
What are you excited about?
What am I excited about? Very
motorbike trip.
Exactly, very, very tangential.
We're going to go into a sour note.
So no, it's actually
we got to end on a high note.
High note.
I think
so I bought myself a motorcycle recently, as you very well know.
You probably said it in the previous podcast.
I probably did. I had an acquisition of one of my side projects, and as a little reward, I got myself a Royal Enfield Classic 500, and I have been thoroughly enjoying riding it around the peninsula, going and watching sunsets and just chugging along.
Yeah.
It's going to be raining today and tomorrow, but this weekend it should clear up.
We're going to plant trees.
We're going to go plant trees on Saturday morning from 9 until 12, and then on Sunday is the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride.
Oh yes.
So going to potentially rent a suit for the occasion, and then all the motorcycle clubs in Cape Town get together, and we'll be very gentlemanly and ride around with monocles and all of that.
Do you even own a monocle?
Dude, I don't even own buttons.
Buttons. Yeah. So how are you gonna sort
I'm
that out?
gonna have to rent a suit.
You're gonna rent a suit?
I may have to, yeah. Just return this damp, mud splattered suit at the end of Sunday. Oh yeah, no, this I've got some good use out of this one.
It's got the spirit of adventure just drenched throughout the suit.
Exactly.
Clean that out, really.
What are you excited for?
I'm excited for the tree planting day, actually. It's gonna be in Woodstock, right?
It's gonna be in Woodstock.
I'm interested to see where. Woodstock, you kind of think of industry. You think of clothing companies, but not clothing like industrial clothing, like seamstresses in roads. That's what I kind of think of when I think of Woodstock.
Yeah, so this is more towards Upper Woodstock, and it's a primary school called Mountain Road Primary, and we're going to be doing some urban greening. So we're going to be planting some trees, creating a little garden over there where kids can play and hopefully not trample all over the plants. So that we have to be very careful about how the plants are built.
I remember back in the day I did some community service where we planted a vegetable garden for a clinic, and it was something that we kind of did every year, but we planted it, and after a while, it just got trampled. And
Yeah. So on that depressing note.
No, but I mean, like that's the thing. Rejuvenation and plants make such a big difference to a space.
It does.
And especially in terms of like mental health.
My room is a veritable forest. I've just got my monsteras and my peace lilies slowly taking over my room.
But you're at a stage where you need to think of like boa constrictors coming at you at night.
Yeah, no, I do.
Strangling you.
Yeah, it is the fucking Amazon.
If you don't get eaten by the mosquitoes, those pythons and pumas are going to come after you.
I think what I actually need to do is I need to get some plants that eat mosquitoes, right?
Yeah, like Venus mosquito traps.
Exactly.
That would be cool. But anyway, I could do with another coffee.
I could also do with another coffee.
So let's call it.
Poppity pop.